Big Ten Power Rankings, Big Ten Resume Rankings, right here at the Voice of College Football. It's a 2-for-1. Please like and subscribe. Best discussion, debate, and analysis right here. Okay, we're familiar with the top 25 that actually makes sense, not based on my observations or evaluations of the teams, but their resumes. What are the results on the field? So we're going to apply the same process here with the resume ranking that has to do with your record, who you've played, and the performance on the field. But also the power ranking. That's my evaluation of these teams. Who are the best teams in the conference? Maybe certain teams, Ohio State, have not played anyone, but we can still evaluate them to be better than the results thus far. Therefore, it's a determination of talent, coaching, performance, and then moving forward, what we expect out of these teams for the remainder of 2024. So the resume and the power rankings, you get a 2-for-1 here at the Voice of College Football. Let's start at the bottom. The number 18 in our power ranking, also number 18 in our resume rankings, Purdue. They've been awful. They had the one freebie, the one gimme against Indiana State. They took advantage and won 49-0. Then was the big showdown against Notre Dame. As just a 10-point dog at home, they were completely annihilated. This is probably the worst beatdown in college football this season. 66-7 to the Irish, who had lost in Northern Illinois. Purdue's a bad football team. They lost on the West Coast against Oregon State. They were somewhat competitive in that game, losing 38-21. Ryan Walters has some work to do. This is a slow-footed football team with little offensive line play. The defense gets annihilated. 350 yards on the ground the last two games. Number 18 in both the resume and the power rankings, Purdue. At number 17 in the power rankings, we've got Northwestern. They scored all of 5 points last week in Washington. Washington's not a great football team with a great defense. Northwestern just can't throw it. Look at the quarterback statistics from the Washington game. Northwestern did have a nice effort at home a few weeks ago against a pretty decent Duke team that's 4-0. They had control of the game, had a one-score lead late, should have closed it out, had one play go against them, a tough officiating call. They lost in overtime, and now Northwestern has 2 losses on the season against 2 wins. They're number 17 in the power rankings and are number 15 according to the resume rankings. Northwestern's got a bye week coming up, and David Braun trying to turn things around at 2-2. Next up on our resume rankings and power rankings as well, we got UCLA. Okay, UCLA we've got ranked as the number 17 resume and number 16 power ranking team in the Big Ten. Beat Hawaii, barely. Hawaii's bad. They had that game on the island, and they had to come back to pull it out 16-13. Then they played a horrendous game in which Indiana completely ran them out of the Rose Bowl. So you've got a team from the Midwest going all the way to the West Coast, and typically that's a great spot for the team on the West Coast to take advantage. Historically, that's a tough spot for a team from the East to go to the West and win with the time change and the travel involved. But UCLA's ineptitude completely wiped that out, and the Hoosiers dominated that game and cruised to a 42-13 win. And then this past weekend, UCLA played a strong first half at Death Valley, stayed right there with LSU, scored with about 10 seconds left in the first half. Actually, the final play of the first half, knotted the game at 17, got blown out in the second half, 34-17. At number 16 in our power rankings, number 17 in our resume rankings, UCLA. In week 1 of 2023, Dragan Kesich kicked the game-winning field goal for Minnesota on the last play of the game against Nebraska, and they won the opener. This time he missed, and they lost to North Carolina, a game the Gophers could have won. And looking at the rest of their schedule, they really should have won that game because there's not going to be many opportunities for this football team. Minnesota coming off a 31-14 beatdown at the hands of Iowa, and they were leading in that game 14-7, and they got mauled by the Iowa running game. So at number 15 in our power polls, a Minnesota team that pitched back-to-back shutouts against Rhode Island and Nevada, but it was back to reality against Iowa. Minnesota's got a trip to Michigan coming up this Saturday. So number 15 in the power rankings, number 16 in the resume rankings. Gophers. Wisconsin's been one of the power programs in the Big Ten going back to the early 90s, established by Barry Alvarez, and there's been a little drop-off, typically winning 9-10 games per season. However, there's a reason they fired Paul Chryst despite going 9-4, and Luke Fickell seemed to be the man. Well, rough first season at 7-6, and considering the schedule, the quarterback situation, and losing Tyler Van Dyke, with Braden Locke stepping in as the backup quarterback, highly touted coming out of high school, Wisconsin has not looked good thus far this season. We've got them number 14 in our power rankings, also number 14 in our resume rankings. Beat South Dakota, barely beat Western Michigan, a game they trailed by 1 point in the fourth quarter and got some help with a muffed punt. And with Bama, they got a beatdown in that one, 42-10 at number 14, both resume and power ranking, Wisconsin. Now we move to the number 13 team in our power rankings. That would be the Terps of Maryland. They were a 10-point favorite in their lone Big Ten game against Michigan State. They lost that game at home. It's going to be difficult for them to rebound from that setback because that was definitely a winnable game. They have completely taken the likes of UConn and Villanova to the woodshed. They had a nice win on the road against a Virginia team that led them in the second half, but the Terps came back with a strong 2-score win. Maryland football going to Indiana. This is going to be a key game for both teams. Indiana hosting Maryland. The Terps at number 13 in our power poll, number 12 in our resume rankings. Washington, Jetfish Will Rogers doing a nice job in winning its first Big Ten game, 24-5 against Northwestern. There will be tougher games ahead beginning on Friday night at Rutgers. But for right now, wins over Weber State, Eastern Michigan, and Northwestern. The loss at Washington State, the Huskies are just a couple yards away from being undefeated right now. They had a 1st and goal inside the 5 against Washington State, but lost the Apple Cup as they were stopped on a goal line stand. At number 12 in our power rankings, also number 13 in the resume rankings, are the Huskies of Washington. All right, now up to number 11, and an improved team. Thanks to Jonathan Smith. He did a heck of a job at Oregon State. It can't be accentuated any more than what is justified. Jonathan Smith's work at Oregon State, his final 2 seasons at 10-3 and 8-4, remarkable what he proved in Corvallis. He comes to Michigan State. We're going to give him 2 or 3 years to contend in the Big Ten, but they look to be a strong team already. They should have won this past weekend at Boston College. They led in the fourth quarter 19-16, gave up a long touchdown pass on a broken coverage. Then they were driving the ball down the field. Aiden Childs threw the ball into double coverage, made a poor decision, and threw the interception in the end zone. But Michigan State 3-1 right now with what we consider to be number 11 in our power rankings, the number 10 resume ranking, and a date coming up with Ohio State at home. So Michigan State already with a Big Ten win as they upset Maryland, off to a strong start. Again at number 11 in our power rankings. Sparty, we move up to number 10 in the power rankings, and the number 9 resume ranking belongs to Rutgers. Okay, Rutgers in typical Scarlet Knight fashion, of course, they scheduled the cream puffs out of the gate. Howard, big win. Akron, big win, no problem. Then they proved something this past weekend. They went to Lane Stadium, one of the more difficult places to play in college football, took on Virginia Tech. They dominated the first 3 quarters of this game. They led 23-7, and they could have blown the Hokies out of the stadium. They fumbled at the Virginia Tech 2. That should have been a touchdown. They also had a 1st and goal inside the 5 and were stuffed there. They let Virginia Tech go all the way back, tied the game at 23. Then in the final 2 minutes, the Rutgers offense and defense pulled off the game-winning and game-saving plays of the day with the 68-yard screen pass that set up the go-ahead field goal. And then with less than a minute left on the clock, interception on a batted ball at the line. Remarkable plays by Rutgers in the clutch to save what could have been a blown lead and a blown game in Blacksburg. Rutgers is 3-0. They're number 10 in our power rankings, number 9 in our resume rankings, with a key date against Washington. Should be a heck of a matchup in Piscataway. All right, moving up to number 9 in our power rankings, we've got an undefeated, I said it, undefeated 4-0 Indiana football team. The Hoosiers. How about this? They have defeated UCLA at the Rose Bowl, as we discussed. They have blown everybody out that they have played. So this is not just Indiana winning games against horrible competition. This is Indiana dominating bad football teams like FIU and Western Illinois, and this past weekend against Charlotte, winning by 38 points. Indiana football doesn't typically do that, but Kurt Cignetti on the sidelines and Curtis Rourke at quarterback have made a difference. Now, Indiana's got a date against Maryland. That's going to be a key factor in determining whether this Indiana team is clearly for real and a mid-tier team in the Big Ten. Right now, number 9 in our power rankings, but their resume ranking quite a bit better at number 6. So the top half of the conference includes the Huskies of Nebraska, and of course they could be much higher than this right now. They were oh so close to closing out Illinois, but could not get it done. They had a one-score lead for much of the game, but this team was completely outplayed in overtime and down the stretch against the Illini. Disappointing night, but consider this was Dylan Raiola's first appearance, first of all in a Big Ten game. First really big, close game as they blew out Colorado. Much hyped game, but the Huskers were way too much for the Buffs. Blew them away, so there was no pressure there for Raiola. But in this game, this is the first time at this level that he's had to face fourth quarter meaningful snaps. And there were some issues for the Huskers, who are now 8-31 in their last 39 one-score games. Most of those the responsibility of Scott Frost, but Matt Rule has yet to crack the code, yet to turn this around. We know Nebraska is much, much better. They blew out UTEP, Colorado, and UNI, but they've got to get it done in the Big Ten. The next qualifier for Nebraska, they should be able to get back on track because they're taking on the worst team in the Big Ten, Purdue, on the road as the number 8 team in our power rankings, number 11 in our resume rankings, GBR. Up to number 7 in our power rankings. This is one heck of a football team, and in fact, based on resume, they are the number 1 team in the Big Ten, based on resume, because they have done the most with the schedule they've been given. They beat Kansas as a touchdown underdog. They beat Nebraska this past Friday night as a 10-point dog on the road, and that's, of course, Illinois. They've got the most quality wins. They've also blown out their other 2 opponents. Number 1 resume ranking, number 7 in our power rankings, with an enormous date. They could really prove themselves in Happy Valley this Saturday. It's Illinois, again, at number 7 in the power poll, but number 1 resume in the Big Ten. All right, up to number 6, we've got Caleb Johnson, the leading rusher in all of college football, racking up 206 yards rushing against Minnesota, but this is almost a weekly thing for Caleb Johnson at this point. The quarterback play, the passing game is still an issue, but Iowa's defense, outside of 2 Minnesota touchdown drives in the second quarter, still playing up to Hawkeye football. Number 6 in our power rankings, coming off that 17-point win against Minnesota. You've got Iowa. They've got a bye week before they play Ohio State, and of course they are one 54-yard field goal away from being undefeated right now. 3-1 Hawkeyes. Number 6 in the power rankings, number 8 resume ranking. All right, let's get to the top 5 in our power rankings, and a team that, again, is oh so close to being much higher. And actually, if they had won this game this past weekend and they were just a couple minutes away and 90 yards away, they would be number 1 right now, and that's USC. Of course, the impressive effort on Labor Day weekend against LSU in Vegas. They destroyed Utah State, shut out Utah State, had the bye week. They go to the big house, and from early second quarter all the way to late fourth quarter, USC was the better team. However, they got beat up front on the offensive side. They could not pass protect for Miller Moss. That was the number 1 big issue, and then got gashed in the running game defensively. And of course, Khalil Mullings ripped it off for 65 yards, and that led to the Michigan score that won the game. Otherwise, USC, again, based on their resume, would be number 1, which I have currently at number 5, and as a power ranking after losing to Michigan at number 5, SC. Going up to number 4, of course, the team that barely beat USC, and what a classic matchup between two Titans, two blue bloods. Michigan struggling mightily against Fresno State, Davis Warren at quarterback. Then, of course, the beatdown against Texas, in which the defense actually looked worn down and not nearly as good as they were expected to be this year. And then they just kind of methodically get by Arkansas State. Okay, then the big showdown against USC, and they played it close to the vest in true Michigan style with this Alex Orji situation at quarterback, which I think that they need to improve and do something about it down the road against better competition, because everybody's going to load up against the running game, and Alex Orji or somebody is going to have to throw a pass or 2 or 5 downfield during some of these games. Michigan, of course, with a big win against USC, is now 1-0 in the Big Ten. They're number 4 in our power poll. They're also number 4 in our resume ranking, with Minnesota coming to town. Now let's go to Penn State at number 3. Number 3 in the power poll, number 3 as a resume ranking as well. Penn State, of course, got off to a great start with a 22-point win in Morgantown against West Virginia. They struggled against Bowling Green. They trailed late in that game, 24-20, before they pulled out the win. Had the bye week, blew out Kent State as expected, 56-zip, and now it's on to the Big Ten. And in what should be the game of the week in the Big Ten, Penn State welcoming Illinois to town, our number 3 team in the Big Ten, both in terms of power ranking and resume ranking, are the Nittany Lions. Now we're up to our final 2, and you know who they are. We're talking power ranking first and foremost, and we go to Autzen Stadium and Oregon. Sure, they had the 2 rough games against Idaho and Boise State, and they should be docked for that, and they are to a certain extent. However, they bounced back after winning those games, and Boise State's a quality team. Then they took on Oregon State and just completely annihilated them by 5 touchdowns. So if you look at the resume, it's number 2 in the Big Ten. Not to Ohio State, but to the number 1 team, Illinois, in terms of resume. In terms of power rankings, again, this is the evaluation of the best teams in the Big Ten, 18 all the way up to number 1. We got Oregon at number 2 in the power rankings, number 2 in the resume rankings, with a date at the Rose Bowl against UCLA this Saturday. And that leads us to our number 1 team in the Big Ten in the power rankings. And I think few people would dispute this across the nation that follow college football, that right now, this appears to be the best team in the Big Ten. Number 1, Ohio State. They've played no one. They are the only team in the Big Ten out of 18 that has played no one. If you give them anybody else's schedule, shoot, if they would have played Purdue's schedule, they would have already played Oregon State and Notre Dame. If they would have played UCLA's schedule, they would have had to deal with Indiana and LSU. Everybody's played at least 1 game, and most teams have played 2 games already. For the Buckeyes, nobody. But we know what the talent is. We know what the ability is and the production. This is the best team in the Big Ten as it stands right now, until proven otherwise, starting Saturday against Michigan State. That's a tougher assignment than it appeared to be before the season started. Ohio State's got quite a run of games coming up here. After Michigan State, it's Iowa, it's Oregon. There's a bye week in there as well, but they got Penn State and Nebraska to deal with as well. That is 5 difficult games, and so Ohio State's going to prove to be the best, or maybe not quite what we would expect to be a national championship contender. Again, when we look at the resume, I've only got Ohio State at number 7 in our resume ranking because they've been dominant, but have played the worst schedule in the conference to date. But it's a date at East Lansing, and of course, we're going to find out about these teams top to bottom here in the next few weeks. Resume rankings look like this in the Big Ten. You got Illinois at 1, Oregon 2, Penn State 3, Michigan 4, USC's number 5. 6 is Indiana, followed by Ohio State, Iowa. Rutgers, Michigan State at 10. Nebraska 11, the Terps of Maryland 12. 13 is Washington, 14 Wisconsin, Northwestern at 15, and the bottom three in resume rankings, Minnesota, UCLA, and Purdue. Power rankings once again look like this. Ohio State's number 1, Oregon 2, Penn State 3, Michigan 4, USC 5, Iowa's at number 6, Illinois 7, and then at number 8, Nebraska, followed by Indiana and Rutgers in the top 10. Michigan State at 11, Washington 12, Maryland 13, Wisconsin 14, the Minnesota Golden Gophers at number 15 in the power rankings, UCLA 16, Northwestern 17, and the worst team in the Big Ten, whether you measure the resume ranking or the power ranking, the poor Boilers of Purdue. Comments are welcome down below. Please tell us what you think about our power rankings versus the resume rankings. We will attempt to do this for the other conferences as well. And we will also be releasing our conference rankings with another set of scores and results to analyze from week 4 heading into week 5. It's all right here at the Voice of College Football.